Okay, just having gone through the European cash close, let's just take a bit of a recap of what exactly has happened here from the last half an hour or so, where markets have really sparked into life in what otherwise was a fairly quiet day. Obviously earlier this morning you had the interpretation of the German election, where Angela Merkel secured her fourth term as the Chancellor in Germany. However, her party not having enough for an outright majority, and therefore now we need to go through this process of coming together for a coalition, which is what most analysts are looking for, is a Jamaican type coalition. Should be for the Freedom Democratic Party, the Greens, and then the Merkel's party itself. There is a bit of a divergence in what those particular parties' outlooks are, but they're probably seen as the greatest chance of the coalition forming over the coming weeks or even months. So net result had been a little bit of euro weakness pretty much since the off. However, impact in German equities has been minimal. And I'd say, if anything, people are still of the expectation that net she remains an important piece of the European kind of puzzle. She remains in place. Yes, there was a greater representation of a nationalist far-right party in the AfD, however, that they're not going to have much sway or influence in German parliament, and so worst cases are kind of averted, and most people are of the thinking that a coalition is kind of more or less going to happen. It's just a moment of how long it's going to take. That brings us down then to the main kind of move of the day, and that ultimately came from just a short while ago. If I just transition my screen, these were the comments. North Korea's foreign minister saying the US declared war. We have every right to take counter measures. North Korea has the right to shoot down strategic US bombers even if they are not in North Korean airspace. Trump's declaration of war means all options will be on the table for North Korean leadership. This then prompting an immediate risk-off catalyst to an otherwise, as I said, fairly quiet day, given a lack of real economic data. It was only German IFO we had this morning, but ultimately that was just a minor miss in expectations, and it still is up near record highs in the headline reading, so that was a bit of an overall non-event. So the Korean news, T-notes, you can see here bottom right, going sharply bid, so flight to quality, gains in T-notes, gold, and the Japanese yen. So the US 10-year spiking all the way up to them finding some resistance in that fast money move at 26.04.5. Gold was probably the asset which remained the most bid on the back of the headline. A decent $15 or so move from the initial catalyst on the headline. We then broke some fairly significant levels. Pivot was broken. Then shortly after, the psychological $1,300 handle. We then got above the highs that were seen towards the back end of last week, broke R1, R2, and then we had a little bit of a hesitation as we got up to, you can see these levels have got circled from before. This was the beginning of last week on Monday and Tuesday. Then you had the FOMC obviously break amid the hawkish Fed and strengthen the dollar. Gold shot lower, and so we kind of found some resistance here around that level. Kind of around 1309. 08.7 was tested before it initially broke higher to 1310. We've had a bit of a pullback since then, but still remaining higher post these Korean developments. I guess the one thing you've got to keep an eye out for is response from Donald Trump. It's going to be important. Obviously, this is a substantial increase in the rhetoric from North Korean side, talking about shooting down strategic US bombers even if they're not in North Korean airspace. It'd be interesting to see how forceful, or on the opposite, if you start to see Trump just backing off slightly, given these threats from North Korea. But again, it's difficult to second guess the situation. Both are fairly confrontational characters, so certainly there could be some further developments in these moves that we've seen occur. If Trump's going to formally respond, as per usual, I'll be looking at the medium of Twitter for that to be probably delivered. Okay, so otherwise, quick look at Brexit talks. There's been a couple of comments that I've seen here come down from Barnier, the lead negotiator from the European side. In summary, EU must decide whether Brexit transition is in its interests, maintains EU laws, said that May's speech must be translated into a position in terms of Brexit talks, and went on to say EU is hoping for progress on all key points this week. So not a great deal still of detail coming out of these conversations. We have seen a little bit of cable weakness, having just edged more recently here back below the support point or lowest level that we saw late in the European morning. But the dollar's a little bit stronger now, probably just playing in part to this flight to quality kind of move, even though obviously this involves the US. It's still at this point the reserve global currency of choice, and so the dollar index is up about 0.5%. So both pairs have been weighed upon, and some of that strength also in the dollar index attributed to weakness in the euro currency on the back of the German situation, and also the read across that will have for potentially the ECB's ability to continue to tighten monetary policy, given these now political uncertainties and what that might mean then for German overall fiscal policy going forward. And so not just T-notes spiking up on this back of this latest development in North Korea, Bunds seen an even better move today, up almost 80 ticks, looking to move back in towards sight of the 162 handle. Okay, just a quick look at the calendar for tomorrow. If I just transition my screens, you have nothing really major from economic data coming out from overnight, but obviously given the yen strength, I can see just flashing in the corner of my eye, dollar yen is still under some pressure, and we are testing, as I'm speaking here, S1. So yen strength typically would be a negative weighing on the Nikkei stock index. Not only that, you start to layer in geographically where Japan sits and the confrontations that they've had historically with Korea, and the fact that any test missiles have flown over Japanese territory, then certainly could be interested to see how the Nikkei opens up later on this evening. And then also the South Korean Kospi and the Korean won, how that also responds in the overnight session will probably be the main feature. Looking further forward into the session though for European traders, for the UK, mortgage approvals, but overall pretty quiet. There's nothing really major here. That will take us through into the afternoon, where you've got US consumer confidence, new home sales, Richmond Fed, manufacturing, some of the key things coming out, alongside further central bank speakers, one from the ECB and two from the Fed, one being a voter and probably the most dovish leaning, so always interested to hear her view. Brainard at a Fed board conference, that'll be at 3:30 in the afternoon. So that's pretty much the schedule. So if you're sticking around for the rest of the day, I would definitely be mindful of any further continuation of these moves. The market certainly has shifted substantially in sentiment over the course of the last hour. Trump response would be something I'd be monitoring with great vigilance. And just looking at these major pairs here amid some of this ongoing dollar strength, you've got 135 handle just being retested here, downside in cable, as I'm speaking. And then likewise, you've got the 119 psychological handle in euro. That's probably worth also keeping an eye on as well in the currency pairs. If we continue to move lower in cable here, you can see we've had that double bottom seen down at 134.87, which really held up the price action from last week. Any break below there and S1 might open up then some of the retracement from the hawkish comments we had out of Bank of England Dove Flager back on the 15th. And then obviously the pound was trading around a 132 handle before the hawkish Bank of England and the minutes that we had back on the 14th. So some downside levels to keep an eye on in cable there throughout the latter part of this evening. In the euro, we've already started to test some of those more interesting levels, that being the initial spike down that we're seeing on the back of the Fed. That's, you can see where we've just broken that bit of an extension here in the last few minutes, having held up on that original move. So we've been now targeting the 119 handle, and any further decline, and you've got that low seen on the 14th at 118.95 below there. Okay guys, going to leave it at that. Have a good evening. Obviously I'm sticking around for a little while yet. If there's anything else that breaks from a news perspective, I'll jump back on. Otherwise, have a good evening.